And welcome to Gridiron Nation on TSN, everyone. He is Gord Randall in Studioville. I'm Jim Mullin on Football Island. We've got 5 big reasons for you to stick around for the next 1 minute at the very least, and it's called the Stateside 5. In at 5, out of the University of Miami, defensive lineman Akeem Mesidor. 4 tackles, 2 of them solo, and 1 half a TFL. The pride of North Vancouver, Keelan White, was right back at it again with highlight reel catches, getting him into the end zone. 6 receptions for 73 yards in that tutty. Elikeo Manor, the bright light for Stanford, back into the 5 again at number 3. 4 receptions, 108 yards, and 1 TD. Out of Hawaii, remember this guy's name, Nick Seneco at wide receiver. A big day for him. 12 receptions, 113 yards, and 2 touchdowns, including the game winner. And he's all patched up and ready to go. The pride of Oakville, Ontario, Curtis Rourke for Indiana. 19 of 29 for 263 yards and 4 TDs in a massive win over Michigan State. Okay, here's another 5 for you. We got 5 undefeated teams in the NC2A and 3 Canadians on 3 teams. Let's take a look at the board. And Gord, as you want to handicap these teams with their remaining schedule, who's got the best chance of remaining perfect and who will take a hit or 2 along the way?
Well, the teams we're discussing, I think the one with the best chance to stay undefeated is Miami. I think they're the most talented roster of the 3 top to bottom anyway, but they also don't have a particularly daunting challenge left on the schedule. They should be favored fairly comfortably, I think, in all 3 of their remaining games. They've got Georgia Tech, they've got Wake Forest, then they've got Syracuse, who's had a pretty good season, but I don't think is on Miami's level. So that is a fairly friendly schedule to finish things out. Now, these Hurricanes have had a tendency to just make things interesting a lot of weekends, so you never know, but I think they'll be comfortably favored in all 3 games from here on out. BYU also doesn't necessarily have a particularly daunting challenge left on the schedule, but I don't think that they're necessarily as a superior roster as Miami is. So, for example, they play Utah this upcoming week. They might be marginally favored in that game, but that should be a pretty close to a pick-em type of game, and that's what they're looking at from here on out. So they're kind of in the middle. And then I think the team with the least chance of being undefeated through the rest of their schedule, as good as they have been this season, is Indiana. And maybe I'm still selling them short a little bit, but they do have both Michigan and Ohio State left on the schedule. And after we saw what Ohio State did to Penn State's offense this past weekend, I am very much interested to see how that plays out in a couple weeks' time, because they beat Penn State with Penn State's only touchdown coming on a pick 6. So they completely shut down Drew Aller and that Penn State offense. I am very interested to see what Curtis Rourke and his boys can do against that. I think it's going to be a significant challenge for them. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that game also is in Columbus. So going to be a tough travel for them. They're still in really good shape with 1 loss, but I think they're probably least likely of these 3 to remain undefeated.
At least Indiana has a week bye to prepare for Ohio State, so that's a plus. If Indiana somehow runs the table with those last 3 games, when you take a look at Curtis Rourke, could he take on Cam Ward for that Heisman Trophy?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think, to be honest with you, I think if if Indiana runs the table in those last 3 games and manages to win the Big Ten on top of that, they'll be the #1 team in the country, right? Like that, there is no question that the Big Ten is a tougher conference top to bottom than the ACC now. There's nobody undefeated left in the SEC. And so if Indiana runs the table and gets through the Big Ten, now that's a lot of ifs. There's a lot of hurdles left before we get to that point. But that very much puts Curtis right in that conversation with Cam Ward. And I think Travis Hunter is still near the top in that conversation, if not at the top. So is Ashton Genty. So it's not as simple as those 2 quarterbacks. This isn't the Heck Crichton. It doesn't automatically go to a quarterback. But it is a little bit more complicated. He's right in the thick of things, though, if they do manage to run the table. And even more so if Miami happens to slip up at some point here.
Elikeo Manor, he's a long way away from his numbers last year. He has to average about 140 yards per game over his last 3 to match his 1,013 yards from last year. But that's really a condition of the Stanford offense, isn't it?
That's just it. I think he's going to be hard-pressed to match those numbers, not through any fault of his own, but because that Stanford offense has not shown the ability to push the ball through the air consistently or effectively. Now, they also don't necessarily have the toughest remaining schedule. And so there's a potential there, but the challenge is, like, Ashton Daniels, the starting quarterback, is completing fewer than 10 passes a game most weeks out, right? And you just, as much as Alec gets a great target share out of that offense, still managed to push himself over 100 yards this week in a touchdown, was just under 100 yards the week before. His production is ticking up, but it's because he is seizing more of a proportion of their passing offense, and not because the passing offense itself has been any more effective. And so I very much worry that he's going to get a chance for any more volume than what we've seen the last couple of weeks. This might be maxed out just because there's not somebody that can get him the ball effectively consistently.
When we come back, we will talk some U Sports. Stick around. And welcome back to Gridiron Nation on TSN, everyone. Now joined by Marshall Ferguson from the CFL on TSN. Marsh, how you doing?
I'm great. It's good to be on with you guys. Congratulations on another year of Gridiron Nation. Everything you guys have been doing has been awesome. I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, still grinding them out year after year here and episode after episode. One team that has done just that in terms of making it to the Yates Cup have been the Western Mustangs. They're back in there again against the other purple team, the Laurier Golden Hawks. It's Elgersma versus Hillock. It is Marshall versus Faulds. And both these teams survived some pretty competitive semifinals to get there, Marshall.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's so interesting to me that both of these teams are the teams that we expected to be in the Yates Cup, but the path that they took there, I mean, I was watching both those games. I was on OUA.TV and I was flipping back and forth. And, in all honesty, I thought Western was going to run away from Guelph, and they weren't able to early on, right? It's like you're in the teams and you're shot for shot against each other, and Guelph was doing an excellent job of being able to stay in that game and do everything they could to scratch and claw. But the margin for victory for both Queens and Guelph was so small. And I think as the game wore on, you really saw the talent level of Laurier and Western kind of come to the forefront. So I enjoyed watching those two teams separate themselves as those games went on, but to have to go through those battles to get to that point, I'm sure that both, as you say, like Greg Marshall and Michael Faulds, they would have appreciated, I'm sure, trying to get guys, clean and healthy and get them out of the game early and build these teams out, all these kind of things. But the OUA was extremely competitive. Parity was, I think, at a really, really high level so far this year. And to see them go into the playoff matchups and have to battle right to the very, very end, and whether it was Laurier having a run of 23, 26 points unanswered, or if it was basically forcing Western to have to find the best game that they've played in the second half of their OUA semifinal. Both those teams had to earn it, and now we get a great showdown against two of the best teams in the OUA. So I think it's the teams we expected to be there, but the way that they had to fight to get there, I certainly didn't expect.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the flip side of your coin, like, yeah, of course you would want to get out of those games clean and maybe fairly comfortably. But the flip side of that is you also need to have your guys ready to go at their 100% level for this next game. And so I think the fact that you had to work to get through these semifinals is probably a good thing for both of these teams, especially in a conference where that hasn't necessarily always been the case week in, week out. You want to make sure that you have a reason to be at the top of your game. And I think that Queens and Guelph both provided stiff enough challenges for them to do so. And just to put a quick kind of in requiem for those two teams that didn't quite make it, Guelph, I didn't think that Guelph was going to have the defense to be able to put the clamps on Western. And yeah, they still give up 30 points at the end of the day, but generally speaking, they kept the clamps on that Western offense enough to remain competitive throughout most of the afternoon. And then on the flip side, Queens, we knew had a very good defense, but offensively, I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to keep up. And again, they came up just short, but I thought that I was quite impressed and surprised a little bit with Queens being able to be right there for most of the game, given some of the challenges that they've had moving the ball at various points this season. So I think good news ending for the year for those two teams, even if they didn't quite make it over the hump. And then for the Western Laurier perspective, I think, like I said earlier, I think them having to earn it puts them in the best position to be ready to go right from the beginning of this Yates Cup and execute at a high level.
Yeah, and I would even say, Jim, to add on to that as well, like, I think when you look at the teams that lost in the quarterfinals, whether it's like Ottawa, Windsor, McMaster, like, there were teams that can all take positives out of those games. Even York, like, missing out on the playoffs but being close to making it into the dance. I think there's a lot of teams in the OUA that feel like they have something to build on, which makes for a really interesting start to 2025, because there's going to be legitimately probably 8 teams that feel like, well, we can challenge whoever wins the Yates Cup coming up this week. And then the question becomes, but who can actually do it? Because every team convinces themselves that they can have those building blocks and keep working towards the Yates Cup championship. But as we know, usually by the middle point of the U Sports season, any of those teams that the 8 that I mentioned that feel like they can build on that, they'll probably hit a brick wall and go, it's where the contenders and the pretenders really start to sort themselves out next year. So it'll be a fun off season, I think, of trying to build those things up, but I don't know who will be able to actually act on it when we get to next fall.
Specific to the Yates Cup, I'll go to Gord first on this. What does Western have to do to win? What does Laurier have to do to win? And then March, I want to hear from you.
Well, I think for Laurier, the key is that they have to maintain some balance in their offense. I think that that's probably a bit of a given for the Western offense, so they've been much more pass-heavy this season than they have in their kind of heyday under Greg Marshall. But I think this Laurier offense needs to make sure that it doesn't put absolutely everything in the weight of the world on Taylor Elgersma's shoulders. So I think they need to find a way to maintain some balance on offense against what should be a stout Western front after facing a stout Queens front the week before. So I think that that's going to be one of the points of emphasis for them. And on the Western side, I think Western needs to try to create turnovers. I think that Taylor Elgersma, if you let him get into a groove, is far and away the best quarterback in the country right now. And you need to find a way to create splash plays and put yourself in position to disrupt that kind of rhythm that he can be so dangerous with. So I think that those are kind of the big keys that jump out for me on both sides.
Yeah, I would say for me, in terms of Western, the quarterback for Laurier, Elgersma, he reminds me a lot of the guy that I backed up for 3 years in Kyle Quinlan in terms of size, athletic ability, arm strength, like the way that he honestly plays angry, because Quinlan played the game very, very angry. Kyle Quinlan did. And when he was at his very best, Kyle was playing the game with just a ferocity where he wanted to run through people. He wanted to throw the ball, 50, 60 yards down the field at any given opportunity. Elgersma has a lot of that energy in him. And I feel like if I'm Western in this Yates Cup, I have to do anything and everything that I possibly can to not let Taylor Elgersma start to get momentum. If I'm Western, whether it's blitzing, whether it's going off script, whether it's getting out of your usual tendencies in terms of like the cover 4 defense and all the rest of playing it high and safe and making him earn it, I think they have to try and make sure that he doesn't get into that rhythm. And on the other side, if I'm the Laurier Golden Hawks, I think the thing they have to do if they're going to win this Yates Cup is they have to be able to spread the football out to everybody in their receiving corps. Because when Laurier is at their very best, I don't think it's just Ethan Jordan ripping it up and down the field and getting those 1,000 yards that he had this season. I genuinely think that it is them being able to dink and dunk, and it's 10 routes here, and then it's a little, out route there, and it's a tunnel screen, and it's Michael Falls, I think, is really going to be challenged in this game where he needs to make sure that everybody gets touches. And the way that we see the opening, I would say that honestly the first quarter, not even number of plays, but the first quarter, the way it's scripted will tell you, I think, a lot about the way that he's going to actually end up building out this game plan. But I would love to see Laurier lean on everybody in their receiving corps, because I think that could be the difference maker for them.
A lot of drama in the Canada West this past weekend. Were they brave visitor comebacks, or were they hometown meltdowns in those two games? That's one of the things I want to know, as both Saskatchewan and Regina rally on the road. So it's an all-Saskatchewan final in the Hardy Cup. How would you look back on those games, Gord, and what does this set up in the Hardy Cup?
I think the way you presented it is the answer is both. I think full credit has to go to the road teams for going in there and earning it. And also I think there's a lot of looking over shoulders and having some regrets from the home teams. UBC, Isaiah Knight, a non-factor in this game, I assume didn't play. I did not see him step on the field. Obviously, I didn't scan the entire sideline, but did not see him step on the field. That was a surprise blow for UBC, and I think, unfortunately for them, Garrett Rooker had an excellent game, 372 through the air. Derek Engel, the backup, had another 66, so they were able to move the ball pretty effectively through the air, but losing that balance, especially in the crunch time in this game when they had a lead and an ability to put Saskatchewan away potentially, I feel like not being able to lean on the run game like they would with an Isaiah Knight in there was a big hit for UBC. But I don't want to cheapen any aspect of what Saskatchewan did. Saskatchewan rolls down the field, they punch in a touchdown, they recover the onside kick, roll right down the field again, and punch in the winning score with less than a minute left. I mean, that is great clutch football. And we've been talking about it a lot throughout the fall. This Saskatchewan team is a veteran team that has fought a lot of battles together and won some big games. And it felt like that veteran savvy for them came to the forefront when they needed it most and was something they could lean on when that momentum swung in their favor in the fourth. And so they did a great job there. And then with Regina, I mean, Noah Pelche, what a gutsy performance from him. I thought their defense did a great job at limiting Braden Stubbs on the ground. He still went for 134, but not going crazy. And then forcing Jackson Sachinski into mistakes. Jackson Sachinski, barely over half his passes completed, no touchdowns through the air. That's what you need to do to put the clamps on the Manitoba offense. And it's just a bit of a shame from a journalistic narrative perspective that this is how Brian Toby's career goes down in a season that once held such promise for Manitoba. For them to go down with a real whimper, losing to a 3-5 team at home in the first playoff game is an unfortunate way for things to end on what's an otherwise legendary career.
Marsh, but that's not a 3-5 defense with this Regina Rams team. That's the one thing that I think you can take away from this season so far for Regina.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've, they have a ton of talent. We see that every year when we cover them in the draft, right? When players come out of there, whether it's at linebacker, defensive back, otherwise, like they have guys who fly off the edge. They have linebackers that can drop into coverage. They can blitz off the edge. They can make havoc in the backfield. They can, disrupt quarterbacks and pass coverage and all the rest. So Regina is an extremely, extremely well-coached football team. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. But I would just say this about Canada West. Like, Jim, this matching is a real thing, right? Like, whether it's on Wednesday nights or whatever, like whatever day of the week you want, the MAC is always these crazy finishes all the West. People might think like, oh, I love the OUA because I live in Ontario and I'm around in Hamilton. I went to McMaster and all the rest. Man, Canada West is crazy. It's every single week. I love watching Canada West football because the athletes that come out of there, honestly, in these type of situations, it's not just that the actual results are entertaining and are great football for people to be able to watch. It's also the fact, I honestly believe that it actually prepares these athletes to go into the Canadian Football League, those who are talented enough to make the step to the next level, because any situation that you get in the Canadian Football League, if you've played in Canada West, you've probably seen onside kicks, 2-point conversions, have to go for squib kicks, quick kick, like every situation imaginable seems to play itself out in Canada West. And I think that showed through in the playoff games, but having an All-Saskatchewan final, I think, is a really interesting dynamic just because those two teams know each other so well. And I would love to be able to see whoever comes out of that really, truly contend for a Vanier Cup this season, because I think they have the talent to do it from top to bottom.
In Quebec, Arnaud Desjardins did not finish his game with Laval in the semifinal. Jonathan Senecal also took a nick, but he should be fine. I guess that's the minus going into this, but when you take a look at the two games that Montreal and Laval have played this year, would you have it any other way in the Dunsmore Cup, Marshall?
No, I mean, this is the quintessential Dunsmore Cup matchup, the way it's supposed to be. When I talk about the idea of, action kind of being what happens in Canada West, I would say the SEC, like these grinded out, Alabama, Georgia, whether it's, Auburn up against, anybody that plays in the SEC, it's like to have to grind your way through, and it can be a singular play that changes the outcome of those matchups. Every single year, somehow, that's what the Dunsmore Cup seems to come down to. And this year is no exception. I think for Laval and Montreal, the way that they have played against each other this year, it's been so close, so tight. And I always wonder about this, guys. I don't know if it is systems, if it's coaching staffs, if it's familiarity, if it's rivalry. There's this special combination of factors that seem to lead to these two teams being a singular play apart from your year moving on and having a potential to win a national championship, or just having your year go, flying in the dust. And I always find that amazing about these two, because let's be real, like any given year, there is enough talent on these two teams to be able to win a Vanier Cup. But only one of them gets to move through, right? It's kind of like the conversation we've been having about the CFL awards voting. It's like, well, most outstanding Canadian, we shouldn't have to pick between Brady Oliveira and Tyrell Ford just because they happen to play on the same team. It's kind of the same when you talk about Montreal and Laval. It's like if we were to have, that expanded playoff that the NCAA is going to this year with the 12th team, it's like to have Montreal and Laval be on opposite sides of the bracket and play down. I mean, would anybody doubt that they would have a high potential of going into a Vanier Cup against each other kind of thing? So the fact they play in the same conference, I mean, the negative is it that we don't get to see them necessarily go into that huge game down the stretch against each other. The positive is you essentially get what feels like a national championship game every time they meet in the Dunsmore Cup. And this year is the exact same as it's always been, which is line play, dominance, physicality, and they have the potential to be able to just blow the game open at any given moment with, a 60, 70, 80-yard pass play down the field as well, or just pound you on the ground and beat you up. So they're so multiple, both these rosters. They're so well coached that it's amazing to see the consistency and the talent that they have.
Yeah, and I just wonder with the quarterbacks being nicked up, I just hope that this means that we don't get a departure from the recent trend of this rivalry being a little bit more offensively oriented than it has been historically. I mean, lest we forget, our venerable host has referred to it as the rock fight for over a decade now, and we decided officially on this program a few weeks ago that we needed to retire that moniker. I just hope that with the two quarterbacks potentially not at 100%, that we don't revert back to complete rock fight territory. I don't want to see a bunch of safeties. I don't want to see the punt field position game all throughout the afternoon. I want the talent, whether that's the talent on the line of scrimmage, whether that's the talent in the skill positions, whether it's the talent at the quarterback position, I don't care. I want that talent to be able to shine and to be able to show out and determine the game, and not a chess match, which if I wanted to play chess, I would be more of a chess guy and less of a football guy. So I value strategy, but I hope that the nature of the game just doesn't turn back the clock a couple years and go back to the, somebody's going to win this 16-13 or something like that.
Guys, thanks very much for this. When we come back, it is the Sickos Committee. Yes. And welcome back to Gridiron Nation on TSN, everyone. As promised, it is Sickos Committee time. And we are calling on the commish to bring us up to date on just what the Sickos Committee is. If you follow college football, and I'd say in North America or on this entire planet, you should know what the Sickos Committee is. But if you don't, here's the commish. Commish, good to have you on. We've been chasing you for a few weeks now. I'm glad that we caught you.
I'm glad to be here on Canadian television. So this feels appropriate as the commish reaching out, international outreach. We already have a big contingent of followers in Australia due to the love of punting, which we're big fans of the CFL onside punt. We're huge fans of any part of the game, and the college football game is just so wonderful and wild, and it spans so many different teams, and it's basically like the last chance you get to play organized football in your life, because unfortunately not all of us can be professional football players. So we like to celebrate all the weirdness and all the fun, and we shine a light on crazy touchdown celebrations we just saw from Incarnate Word this weekend, which happened in the same city where I reside, and it's spreading to the NFL now, and we just like to have a lot of fun, and we really don't care about, somebody's going to win the title, but the fun part is really just getting to that point and just celebrating every little game that we get to enjoy all year long.
Canadians see college football in the United States through the television lens, through the D1 lens, through the SEC lens, crowds of 80, 90, 100,000. But there's a much broader world, even just through the total space of Division One, that anyone can dive into. I've been to games in Buffalo. Look, I've been to games where there's 7,000 people in the stands. I've been to games where there's a lot of wacky stuff that goes on, and I find that appealing. I think that's something that we share in common, is the randomness that can occur in college football. I think in a way it's kind of a shame that the people in Canada only see it through that TV lens. What do you see in the States, and what do you see through the lens of Sickos Committee in terms of all the little wrinkles and creases and idiosyncrasies in the game that you can amplify through your platform?
This, we just wanted to highlight the fun games. We kind of just do the throw the records out, and we look at interesting matchups from an unconventionally appealing aspect. That's kind of like our mantra, unconventionally appealing, because you're talking about everybody's looking at it on TV through the SEC. I'm like, yes, the natural person that wants to watch this game wants to see the best versus the best. We look for the matchups that match basically equally talented teams versus equally talented teams, no matter what the records are. So like last week we had Northwestern versus Purdue as our game of the week. Now the Purdue's like 1-6, Northwestern's 3-5. I mean, like your normal person is not going to search that out, but we wanted to see that game, and we got to see that game go to overtime. Because we knew these are like two equally matched teams. There's going to be a weird snap off of a center's butt. There's going to be a strange, decision made in overtime, which Purdue made one, which was quite interesting, based off like coaching staffs. And another one, we like Toledo versus Eastern Michigan. You see Eastern Michigan throw Hail Mary at the end of the game, and then instead of going for the extra point in the tie, they go for two. Unfortunately, they miss it, and then they wind up losing the game, even though they complete a Hail Mary, which is things like that. That's what we search out. Like we look for that fun stuff, and we're trying to get everybody to know the lower levels, because a lot of us in the committee, including myself, went to like lower level schools. Like there's 134 schools in Division I, like the championship series. There's like 130 more. So there's like 261 Division I schools. There's like 764 through Division III. So there's so many different stories out there. There's so many different people going to those many different schools. And we love talking about that, because that's the fun part. Like that, you kind of know who's going to be there at the end of the year, kind of. But enjoying the ride the entire season, no matter who's playing what, no matter what the records are. I mean, that's kind of the joy of college football for us.
So who is the Sickos Committee? Who is the committee that you preside over, Mr. Commissioner?
So we had this Twitter account that we have now, which is over 142,000 followers, which is insane to think of. We started this account as like an inside joke for like 20 people. We were in a Discord community, which is like an online chat community. And I started ranking the games during the pandemic year, and I was like, okay, this is the most unconventionally appealing game. Like, who is going to be watching, like, not Indiana this year because they're very, very, very good, but like who's watching like Indiana versus Michigan State at like 7 p.m. when you have like number 1 versus number 2 playing on another network? Like, nobody's watching that one, but we are. I mean, like we have the folks that we have on the podcast. We have one that went to Division III Teal. We have a Pitt fan who's enjoying a great year after a bad year last year. We have the other podcast host. He went to Dartmouth, and he got his PhD from North Texas. I personally I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. I went to Louisiana Monroe, who's been a bottom dweller and praying they can make a bowl game this year. They're one away. And then, I grew up in New Orleans, watched like Tulane football when they played in the cavernous Superdome, which you're talking about 7,000 people in like a stadium that holds 70,000. Yeah, you could see stuff like that. So I've gone to see like so many different games with I like the people in the stands that just appreciate it and support their family, their friends, are the team no matter what. That's what we're here for. And we call ourselves the Sickos. We're not calling your team Sickos. We're Sickos because we can't get enough watching college football. Basically, we want to just keep watching it no matter what's going on. If you're punting a bunch, if you're doinking extra points, I mean there's so much fun to enjoy. And I think probably the favorite play is the safety, which is it's rare, but something had to have gone wrong when somebody gets a safety.
Well, you've been connected to Canadian football now for a little while. You
Big
got
time.
swept up in it. How did you get connected with watching the CFL? Is it one of those things where you get grads from mid-majors, you get grads, say from a conference like the MAC,
Yes.
From a conference like the Big Sky,
Yeah.
right, that come up to Canada, and then you can continue to follow them through there? Was that the connection for you guys?
So, like with the CFL, we started watching the CFL like a good bit, and I've always been fascinated with the CFL because our spiritual home, our Twitter account, is from Shreveport, which I went to like Louisiana Monroe, which is about an hour and a half from Shreveport. And I've always known that Shreveport had a CFL team, like the Shreveport Pirates in the 90s, which, I mean, it's still fun to think about that happened. And the incredible stories from that occurring. And then on top of that, knowing I don't know if you know this off of Twitter, but there's always something like there's a remember some dudes thread where they just remember like players that used to play for their college team. And then you realize, hey, one of those guys is actually in the CFL. Like, hey, it's Jeremiah Masoli. Or like, hey, it's Bo Levi Mitchell from Eastern Washington. Or, it's just like, hey, it's this guy. I remember him playing. And so there's the connection there. Like ULM quarterback, Caleb Evans, who was the backup for Montreal last year, and I think he got hurt this year, unfortunately. But he went to Ottawa, the Red Blacks. And I'm sorry, I got to say that in all caps. The Red Blacks. He went to Ottawa, and I'm like watching him. I'm like, hey, this is cool because not many people from Louisiana Monroe are playing professional football, and like he's like the backup quarterback for the Red Blacks, or he's like the short yardage running specialist for Montreal, the Alouettes last year, and just having that league, and then on top of that, the Canadian rules are so amazing. Like I love the CFL rules. Like I cannot get enough of like being nearest to a fumble if it goes out of bounds instead of having the recovered in bounds. That's amazing. The onside punt by Montreal has been like a huge hit for us. And it when we tweet stuff like that for the normal college football fans, it completely like breaks their brain. And we love that. So it's a lot of fun. It's fun to look at like, what's happening here? Explain this to me. And of course, I can't live without the rouge or the single, whatever you want to call it. Like, give me that at all times. And, like, the walk-off rouge, I think there was a walk-off punt by, oh, man, who did the walk-off punt? Was it the Argos?
It was Jake Julian with the Edmonton Elks.
Edmonton, okay. The last game of the regular season, Edmonton had a walk-off punt. And I'm like, this is, like, people are asking, like, hey, why not just punt it and boot it out the end zone for one? I'm like, well, first of all, the end zones are 20 yards deep. It's kind of tough to boot, and then you're already like 15 yards back. So it's kind of like, okay, who's got the bigger leg, the kicker or the punter? And so just to see the walk-off punt, it's incredible. So that game is nuts. And then learning the 2-down thing. We did a podcast on the CFL in the USA, and that kind of spurred our, interest in the CFL before. And then the combo of like, punts hitting the scoreboard at BC Place this year. It was, oh man, the referee, like just saying, okay, this is odd. It hit the scoreboard. I forgot his name off the top of my head, but it's just a joy because
I think that was Ben Major.
Yeah, Ben Major. He had to do it twice, and then the third ref was just like, hey, whatever Ben said, we're going to replay the down. It's so great. It's, because, sports, essentially, it's supposed to be entertainment. And then people tend to take this too seriously. There was a point in my life where, like, my team loses and I'm going to let it affect the rest of the weekend. And I was like, no, I can't live like this. Like, I have to enjoy in the moment. And then when it's over, yeah, I'm sad that my team lost. But, hey, look, there's 138 other games going on right here. There's another game right here. Like, can you believe that this guy tripped and he threw the ball over his head and that's a safety? Can you believe that? Like, things like that, we kind of try to bring the joy back. And it's funny that our name is like Sickos, and you automatically think of like a negative connotation. And so we're constantly fighting against that connotation, I think. But, we're the ones that are like looking in the window, like just looking at it and just enjoying everything that we see. It's always so much fun.
By the way, as the current General Secretary of IFAF and the incoming Vice President of IFAF and the former President of Football Canada, I am very thankful to you guys for promoting the 110-0 game that Canada scored over Brazil. Thank you very much for that. It actually started the ball rolling for impressions for that World Junior Tournament. You had a direct effect on something that was really a rumor and a secret to people, and your platform then triggered any number of reactions as the United States stumbled their way through that tournament and off the podium. We had 125 million impressions from that tournament. So thanks for getting the ball rolling on that.
I mean, like things like that. If you ever need us to promote something, you got our email address. Let us know. Like we find a lot of things. Like when I first started the account, and then the cartoonist reached out to us, and because we were just using the meme itself as like a logo, and he was just like, "Hey, you know, as long as you keep using this for a good purpose, and you're not trying to make money off of it, you know, you can keep using the image." Then at a certain point where we got a little bit bigger, and I think he found us at like 3,000 followers, which was incredible. As we got a little bit bigger, we reached out to him. We did a licensing deal. We have like our own little like merch store, which I have the thing.
Hold it up. There you go. Free plug.
So this is we have a little pre-order for the stand right now. It looks like it's poking my nose, but it's a little thing. Like he made our own version of this cartoon for us, and we had a couple of different versions of this. We have a pre-order for the stand that's going on right now, along with merchandise. He gets a majority of the profits of that because this is his art, and we wanted to continue that on. We're just grateful for him by allowing us to repurpose his work and put it towards like a football aspect thing, which is incredible. Like the things that we stumbled across over the summer, like we've gotten big that followers will tag us into things and we'll be like, oh my God, like this is amazing. Or we've gotten to the point where we can do data research and find things like I just found Mississippi Valley State, which is a historically black college in Itta, Mississippi. Their punter had an 80-yard punt this weekend. Like nobody's talking about this 80-yard punt. We found him. We found the punter. We put it in our Substack. We tweeted it, like things like that to give impressions to certain little things that we have. It's funny to use the platform, and like we're always going to be trying to use it for good. We're, you know, again, when we talk bad about a team, like it's in jest at all times, and we're laughing with you because we feel your pain. Because a lot of the times, our committee members are also fans of that team, which, you know, we could definitely empathize with what's going on if your team has a really bad game. Like I'm an NFL football fan, and my Saints just fired their head coach today. So I know bad football. Like I grew up with the Saints in the 90s. They were awful. So I've been always about this lifestyle of watching my teams no matter what and just trying to enjoy it.
As a kid, I grew up as a BC Lions fan in the 1970s and the 1980s, and I once had a blog. It was called the Edmonton. We got to leave the name out. I'll say the Edmonton football team ruined my childhood. That was the name of my blog, right? So I understand what this suffering is.
Yes,
for a college football fan, a CFL fan. I just want to touch on one thing with you because. You guys have actually crossed over into Canadian college football from time to time.
Yeah.
What have you seen out of U Sports football that you find intriguing?
So we actually have a Canadian member in our committee. He lives in Hamilton. He was actually able to cover the Grey Cup last year, which the CFO like allowed us into the press room. And of course, his opportunity was to ask about the onside punt to Montreal's head coach, which, you know, lightened the mood a little bit before the game. I believe he asked it. So. The Vanier Cup, which we're familiar with U Sports, we're trying to get into it a little bit more. We don't have like full bandwidth, and a lot of this is kind of like a hobby for us. Like we have like a small business going, but we still have like normal jobs. But crossing in the U Sports is fun because we get to see. There's been some crossover recently, like some Canadian football players that played in college and made it to the NFL. Which is fun. You see, like I think there was somebody
on
Regina.
Your Saints. You have David Onyemata.
Yes, Onyemata.
Brian Dobie's office.
Yes.
One day, Brian Dobie, the head coach of the Manitoba Bisons, Onyemata had never played a game of football in his life.
Yeah.
Right, and then I was doing play-by-play in the Canada West back when he was a rookie, so we got to see his progression of this. Fantastic specimen of a human being in this position where he stumbled around in his first year, where he could execute physically but not be in the right place in his second year. And by the time he got to his third year, you knew he was going places.
Yep.
Right? So he's an example. There's a number of other examples out there, and there's also Canadian players that have played at the U Sports level, and then after a couple of years, gone down to the NCAA and have made an impression as well. So
there's a lot of crossover between that, and I think we were following Simon Fraser, which tried to I think it was Division II in
Division
the NCAA.
2, that's correct.
Yeah, and they were in the Lone Star Conference. Like every team was in Texas, and Simon Fraser's just out there.
Well, it's just the loss of Division II teams in the West, right?
There's not. It's like Division I or maybe Division III. There's no Division II in the West. And then the pandemic, it was weird. They had to play across like the border, like at the Washington State.
School.
Yeah, and so like we find stuff like that like hilarious. Yeah. It's just like it's just such a ridiculous position. But people care about this, and the kids, they get to play. And that's the main thing we want to get them to play. Also, U Sports, my favorite thing about U Sports is almost every single time there's a track around the field, so they have to clip the end zones off. So, like, they have the end zones that are just basically have I think Montreal has one in the CFL too, with McGill College, or McGill University. I'm sorry if I get them upset. But yeah, it's fun to see it because all the fields are different. Like there's weird dimensions of the field. There's a weird home field advantage, which you see that in the NCAA too, with like the colors of the field, like different styles of stands and stuff. And U Sports is very unique. And I mean, having the goalposts in the front still, no matter what you're playing, is just incredibly fascinating, and it is a blast to watch because, the goalpost is in play, and sometimes you could use it as a goalpost pick play for a touchdown, it's incredible. You have to factor it in, and then you got those 20 yards of end zones where you're just throwing deep routes on the 2-yard line, which is nuts.
Well, prior to 1983, they were 25-yard end zones. You really missed out.
Oh, my God. I was only 2 then, so I wouldn't have gotten it then. But
they really cut off some of the corners on some. Actually, in Edmonton, the end zone, the deadline to compensate for the track where they had cut off the corners, they moved the deadline back 30 yards back. Right? So the end zones were 30 yards deep, but in terms of surface area where they had cut off the corners, it worked out to be something like a 25-yard end zone.
That's crazy because I know when the CFL was in Memphis, like the end zones were like 5 yards.
5 and 8 or something.
5.5. It was something.
You had artificial turf along the side.
Yeah, it was a mess. Yeah. But it was fun to look at that and look back at it now because, I mean, you try to understand the decisions. There was a book about it that I read, which was great. I think it was called like End Zones and Border Wars or something like that.
Willis's book, yeah.
Yeah, that book was phenomenal. I bought that and I shipped it up to our Canadian correspondent so he could read it.
Yeah, fantastic. So what's next for you guys? Where are you in terms of subscribers, in terms of followers? This thing's really blowing up for you guys.
It's been crazy because like I spotted an End Zone celebration on Saturday. And basically it's like a headstand that an Incarnate Word player did. And then this thing's at like 7 million views off of a tweet. I don't know how accurate that is. But like 2 NFL wide receivers did the celebration this weekend too. Us blowing up. I mean, we ideally would like to make this full time. I mean, we have a Patreon, we have a store. We're hopefully in talks to make this full time because I'd love to do this full time and explore the wild world more and get out and travel. Like I just recently went to Flagstaff, Arizona to watch Northern Arizona and Idaho State play in the Big Sky Conference, which is like Division I, but like the lower level Division I. Mm-hmm. After every touchdown, Northern Arizona does something like the Red Blacks do. They cut a log and celebrate too. So it's awesome to see like the college logging team cutting a log, like the Red Blacks, and then the Portland Timbers also do it. But it's like the only collegiate. Like I'm right there, and they got a chainsaw cutting a log. I would love to do that. I want to go to all the weird domes. I would love to come up to, catch a CFL game. I've I've adopted fandoms, which you said you were a BC Lions fan, so I have to apologize. I've adopted the Rough Riders fandom. There was, I think it was a John Fraser. We had him on the podcast to do a CFL preview earlier this year in June, I believe. And, you know, I love the color green, as you can tell by the headphones. But I've been rooting for them, and then this year's been wild. They had like a double OT tie. They had, I mean, there's so many different things. They won like last second comebacks, and then they lost like 3 in a row. It's been wild. So I don't know if they can get by Winnipeg. It'd be nice, but you know, Winnipeg is kind of like, I would say, you know, probably one of the best. Like Winnipeg and Montreal seem to be in the Grey Cup final, I would think. But if the Argos can get revenge for last year, and you know, maybe Saskatchewan gets over the hump, it'd be fun though.
Well,
but what we want to do in the future, we want this full time. I would love to do this full time. Are you kidding me?
I would see you do it full time.
I would love to do it full time. And business partner Jordan, who's also on the podcast, wants to do it full time too. And we're approaching like that point where we're like close. If we can get it full time, we'll just bring more and more stuff because, I mean, this is just incredibly enjoyable stuff. And I've been looking at defunct bowl games lately that like used to happen in like the 50s. There was one called the Refrigerator Bowl, and I just want to just talk about that happening 7 times in the 50s in Evansville, Indiana for hours on end. And I would love to get paid to do that.
Well, you know what? Let's think big. Maybe we can. In the mail right now, I have a football being sent to me from the old Can-Am Bowl. Do you know what the Can-Am Bowl is?
Is it the Canadian American Bowl, or
that's right? It was played in Tampa for 2 years.
Yes,
and it was Canadian All Stars from the CIAU, which is the forerunner of U Sports. Against NCAA, they were Division I guys. They were playing.
Yeah,
you know, they were a serious team that they were playing against, and Canada lost by 20 points in the first game.
The rules in that game were weird, weren't they?
They were mostly Canadian.
Yeah,
the field was wedged into the old sombrero in Tampa Bay.
Yes.
So the end zones were shorter, but the goalposts were on the goal line.
Yes.
Right? But they generally played Canadian ball. It was nationally broadcast back on CBC to Canada. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see the Can-Am Bowl presented by Sickos Committee. That's what I'd like to see.
Oh, man.
That's what I will work on with you over the next decade to try to achieve.
I mean, look, that's a goal. I'm all for that. Like, if we can make something like that happen, the Can-Am Bowl, maybe get some. We'll do some Division I like FCS folks, and get maybe we could make it. Yeah, we can make this happen. We got to have this in like a really fun stadium too.
Yeah,
like
100%.
give us a really weird fun stadium, and we're there.
If we could knock a wall down in the Kibbe Dome, it would be perfect.
They can expand the airport hangar out there, which the glorious Kibbe Dome, which is. I'm getting up to the Kibbe Dome at some point. I did the walk-up Sky Dome in Flagstaff, and I did Holt Arena, which used to be called the Holt Mini Dome in Pocatello, Idaho. I'm going to make that trek. If we can make like a Kibbe Dome Canadian American bowl, oh yeah, done for sure.
Start in the Dakotas and work your way towards.
We got it.
Coast. I've been to the Alara Center. It's a fantastic little facility.
Oh, that's in North Dakota, right?
Yeah.
It's where the Fighting Hawks play. Yes,
that's right, and it would match your
it would match the headphones. Yes,
the
there's a lot of green there. Yeah,
exactly. By the way, before I let you go, I'm one of the patrons of the Cornish Trophy, the trophy that's given to the top Canadian in the NCAA. Ooh. We're in year 8 right now. Elike O'Manor of Stanford.
Stanford, yes.
I think it's going to come down between him and Curtis Rourke of Indiana. When it comes time to start getting information out on the old interwebs, can you give us a helping hand?
For sure. Guaranteed.
It's niche.
I mean, again, that's what we are. We are niche. We don't know how we got this big. Honestly, it amazes me every day when like somebody likes a tweet of ours. it's weird because we just started this, and I started tweeting our first big hit tweet. I remember it clear as day. It was a 3-yard punt by Central Connecticut State against Miami. The ball was snapped over the punter's head. He had to run 40 yards deep to get it. He got it, spun around, and was hit as he punted. And then the ball just bounced 3 yards past the line of scrimmage out of bounds. It was a great
that effort. He deserves a rouge for that.
I mean, that's definitely worth a single at least, right?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Commish, thanks very much for this. Appreciate the work that you guys are doing. Love the space that you guys fill. It's great. Keep it going and make this thing full time.
Hey, if we could do it, we're working on it, because I mean that's a goal of ours. And then maybe one day we could do Sickos game day from the Kibby Dome for the Can American Bowl, and we can move the wall, knock the wall out, but leave the goalposts like mounted there on the Kibby Dome. We can work that out. We can figure it out. We get interior designers to figure that out.
When we come back, Games of the Week. Welcome back, everyone. Time for Games of the Week. Gord, what do you got for us?
Well, you're getting a bonus one this week, so I'm going to go undercard first. And the undercard is our guy, Jalen Smith, in North Texas, hosting undefeated top 25 ranked Army. Army, one of 5 remaining undefeated teams in the country. They have had a record-setting season in a lot of aspects. This is the best Army team that we've seen since World War II. And I actually mean on the football field and not on the battlefield. And they've been fantastic. They blew the doors off of Air Force this past weekend with their starting quarterback out. So it'll be interesting to see what his health looks like in this game. And I think that uncertainty leads to a pretty tight line. It's looking at about 5 points right now. So North Texas definitely has a puncher's chance in this one. And if they're going to need to, our guy Jalen Smith is going to need to step up. This is going to be a very different challenge for a defender to face. Smith has historically been a sideline to sideline, pick some passes off, kind of coverage-oriented guy, because that's what most offenses are these days. But against Army, they can actually throw it a little bit this year. But this is a team in which you are going to have to stack the box and figure out how to step up to the run. I'm interested to see how Smith and his colleagues hold up to that. On the main card, alluded to this earlier, another one of the remaining undefeated teams of the Canadian is BYU. And they are going into Salt Lake City to play a cross-state rivalry against Utah. They want to remain undefeated. They've got 3 games left to run the table. And it's been one of the surprise teams this season, in a season in which there's been a lot of surprise teams. And so our guy, Isaiah Banya, wants to get involved on the pass rush side. Utah has been very up and down this year, so it looks like they're kind of ripe for the picking. But Salt Lake City and that stadium of Rice Eccles is no joke. It's one of the toughest places to play in the country. I think BYU is well prepared for that, but it is going to be a big challenge against a well-coached Utah squad. And then finally, the main event of the evening is number 16 LSU hosting number 14 Alabama. Alabama is obviously not this year what the Nick Saban Alabamas were, where they would just strangle you to death every single weekend out. Kalen DeBoer's team is a little bit different and has been a little bit more up and down than that, but Jalen Milroe remains one of the most scintillating talents in college football, a guy that can take over and win any game possible. And LSU remains a team that is playing very well at a very high level. Hey, Garrett Nussmeier, they came up just short against Texas A&M, but Garrett Nussmeier had another good game. He's putting himself firmly in the potential first quarterback off the board conversation for this spring's draft. And then, of course, our guy Parrish Shannon on the defensive line continues to have an affinity for making splash plays for the Tigers. Would love to see a couple of them from him as they host Bama this weekend.
Thanks very much, Gord. For everyone on Gridiron Nation, this is Jim Mullin saying, let's get out to the game.